Have you ever tried to build an Aether portal? Be honest, you know, the one that was going to take you to that sky dimension. Well, if you have, you probably would have been rather disappointed when it just didn't work. There was no sky dimension. But what if there was? What would that sky dimension actually look like? Well, let's find out. Part 1. Getting to the dimension. So far we have 3 dimensions. The overworld, the nether, and the end. And to go to each of these dimensions, you must have gone to the previous dimension. For instance, to go to the end, you must have gone to the nether to get blaze rods, for the ender eyes. And to go to the nether you must have been in the overworld, to get both lava and water, for the obsidian. And we just spawned in the overworld. And thus we could imply that the overall pattern so far is that you need some resources from each dimension to progress into the next dimension. So if there was a sky dimension, it's possible that this pattern would continue. Thus, we could imply that we'll probably need something from the end to get to the sky dimension. And perhaps an item that would fit rather well with getting to a sky dimension from the end could be the elytra. It's a unique item specific to the end, and it allows one to fly, assuming they have enough rockets. Or glide, if they don't. And so maybe if you take your elytra and fly very high into the sky, beyond the build limit, and beyond the sight of any non-elytra travel, potentially, we could find a new structure. Now this is just a concept, but this structure would need to be something that you just couldn't get to without an elytra. So even if you use some fancy redstone launcher, you really shouldn't be able to reach it. This structure needs to be locked so that only endgame players can reach it. But anyways, this sky structure would likely be something rather simple, as to keep with the current Mojang style. And so it's possible that this structure will be made of some native materials of the sky dimension, formatted in a very basic shape. But for now I have just used some quartz, in a plus-like pattern, as an example. So what would this structure actually do? Well, it would contain the portal that would take you to the sky dimension. Now, I would imagine that this new portal would be unlike anything that we have ever seen before, given that each portal that we have so far is unique. So perhaps for the sky dimension, it could be some sort of tall, watery portal right in the center of the sky structure. And so, let's go exploring. Part 2. The Cloud World. This sky dimension would likely be a very foggy area, filled with clouds that greatly obscure your vision, and add to the mystery of this dimension. The atmosphere could also be rather bright, with a star hovering directly above the player, static in its position, and more impressive than the sun that we are familiar with within the overworld. Similar to the end, it's possible that this dimension could be a set of floating islands, but unlike the end, this dimension's islands might just be cloudlands. They could be made of strong glass-like materials that are transparent, yet also strong enough to be stood on and still look like a cloud. There could be random fracture patterns on these cloud glass blocks, which could create a visual illusion of depth, unlike any other natural terrain. And these special glass clouds might even glow and emit a fog of sorts, which could help to further obscure their positions, but also make for a truly mystifying sight whenever found. Now, to get from cloud to cloud, one would likely have to use their elytra for easy travel. But they would need to be careful, for the clouds were dense here, and it would be rather difficult to see where you were going. Also, this realm would lack a bedrock ceiling or floor, thus meaning it could be very easy to get lost and fall forever. It's possible that this sky dimension could also have a weather cycle. For instance, every so often when it rains in the overworld, the sky dimension might turn into rain clouds, shifting the glassy material of the clouds into darker tones, and setting the dimension into a haunting, dark ambience. Perhaps this dimension could even become semi-flooded with water whenever this happens, and maybe the players could even start to drown here. That would be quite a fun challenge. But perhaps they might even add a new weather type to further challenge the players that step foot onto these clouds, as perhaps acid rain could be added. This could be when the dimension and the glass-like materials of the clouds turn into a yellowish hue, and everything else begins to darken and shake. The player could start to take acid damage, which left untreated could kill them rather quickly. Maybe to save themselves they need to brew some sort of special potion, using some of the special glass-like materials of the clouds. That could be like an antidote potion. And so when they drink that potion, they can be safe from the acid rain, and thus they could witness this cloudy world in its most majestical state. It could be such an amazing sight to behold, unlike anything that we are familiar with in any of our current dimensions. Part 3. The structures. Like every other dimension in Minecraft, the Sky Dimension would likely also receive its own unique structures, so here's a few ideas of what they could be. Maybe on some of the smaller clouds we could find the crumbled remains of a once thriving town. The buildings could be unrecognizable, as potentially they would be in a state of near complete decay. There could be small rotten white carpet paths connecting what is left of the towns, and dotted across the ruins there might be chests where the artifacts of this now lost civilization are stored. This could include new items, new music, and perhaps even new enchantments. Further adding to the mysterious lore of these ruins, we might have blue candles dotted around the floor, but they could still be lit, and we might even find incomplete signs of restoration attempts within these towns, secretly implying that someone or something else had been to these towns rather recently. Maybe it was that subscribe button monster. You know, I think you should just subscribe just to be safe. Another possible structure that we might find in the Sky Dimension could be magical towers. These towers would likely be constructed of the same materials as those ruined towns, but unlike those towns, these towers could be fully intact and in pristine condition. Maybe there could be many of these towers in a circular pattern on some of the bigger clouds, and within the center, there could be a nest filled with many great riches. But beware, for as you attempt to gather the gold within, you might just awaken one of the beasts of this dimension. Part 4. The Entities. The towers in the nest are in a similar configuration to the end, and so perhaps this could be the home of a brand new dragon. The Sky Dragon. This dragon could potentially be an inverted version of the Ender Dragon, given that this sky world is rather like an inverse of the End, and so like the Ender Dragon, this Wind Dragon might also have fireball attacks, but perhaps instead of Ender magic, these fireballs could explode into the piles of acid rain that are native to the Sky Dimension. It would also make sense if these Wind Dragons were quicker and dealt more damage with more knockback. But maybe, because they aren't a proper boss mob, they could have less health, and they might even be smaller too, thus meaning they could potentially be easier to defeat. Also, within those towers that surround the nest, special crystals might spawn, and those crystals might heal the dragon, like the end crystals do, or alternatively, they might target you, the player, and deal damage to you, or maybe they might even deal some serious knockback, blowing you away, like the winds. But let's just assume that you're a skilled warrior, and using your elytra and your sword, you are able to defeat the dragon. Well, the reward you'll likely get is a dragon egg, but unlike the familiar Ender Dragon egg that we know, this wind egg would not be limited to just one, as perhaps there could be tens of thousands of these summoning posts across the Sky Dimension, so in theory there could be thousands of wind dragons, and thus, thousands of wind eggs. But what would these wind dragon eggs be used for? Well, there's a lot of potential, but by far the best purpose would be a nice podium for that subscribe button. Another entity that might also arise within the Sky Dimension could be the Breeze, given the fact that at the moment, they're only spawnable in the trial chambers. So maybe this dimension could be their rightful home, where they exist naturally and happily. But if we were going to get a new dimension, we would likely also get a new custom entity, such as the Flying Pig, which could help provide food for these lands, or allow for additional methods of travel. And maybe once you eat this special Flying Pig, you can get the levitation effect, or maybe you even gain the temporary ability to fly as if you weren't creative. But regardless, this is just the beginning, as this entire video was just a theoretical concept that I have quickly created, and there is just so much more that could be added to a Sky Dimension within Minecraft. Maybe you even have some ideas that you can leave in the comments. But wait, before you do that, did you know that the end was originally meant to be the Sky Dimension, but instead it became this dark purple wasteland of death? So what could the end have looked like before it became that purple wasteland? Well, watch this video to find out.